support a huge project. I don't remember, I didn't count the number of authors, but the names cover a whole page in genetics. The addresses, another page. And this project is called Enigma, after the Turing machine for decoding. It represents a global effort of many different countries, of course including America and Germany and France and England, but also Saudi Arabia, nothing from the Far East, no Israelis, which is interesting because it's an approach that costs a lot of money. What the researchers did was actually to follow the recommendation of the Nobel laureate Eric Kandel from 2 years ago, where he published a statement in Science, an opinion paper, saying that the future of neurogenetics will be when brain mapping efforts will be combined with molecular genetics. There were 5 distinguished authors on that statement paper, and the Enigma project is clearly in that direction. And so now it's about 2 years after, 4 consecutive papers in Nature Genetics, talking about screening of over 15,000 individuals for whom the researchers had different cohorts, of course, twins, non-twins, different ethnic groups, everything but the Middle East. And the idea is to measure brain regions and try to see whether there are any genes that mutations in which correlate with differences in the volume of brain regions, which is probably the most straightforward measurement in brain mapping studies. So they say hippocampal volume has been associated by many to different diseases. And we know that hippocampal volume is smaller in post-traumatic stress patients. Hippocampal volume is smaller in pre-Alzheimer's patients. Hippocampal volume is smaller in chronic epilepsy. And there were, of course, different genes that were associated by different authors, mainly based on 10 up to 50, maybe 100 at most patients in a study. And those genes, mutations in those genes were associated with the risk of disease. So it's nothing like cystic fibrosis. It's not that you inherit a single point mutation and you'll definitely get schizophrenia, but it's an increase in the risk. Now, what they did was first to see whether those claims were true in 15,000 patients. Most of the claims showed no association, which does not mean the previous studies were totally wrong, but it means that if COMT, C-O-M-T, we'll talk about it later today, is associated with schizophrenia and Parkinson's disease mutations in these genes, that is ethnic related, it's not global. So that's one thing. Then they found 2 genes that are with mutations that are associated with hippocampal volume. first is neurogenetics. This is a proof that this combination is the future of neuroscience. You can't really measure brain volume alone and blab about it without connecting it to genetics. And you should not do genetics alone without linking it to the neuronal functions if you claim to be involved in neurogenetics. So neurogenetics importance is clear also from the journal. The next level is ethics. I mean, it's not a coincidence that the senior author on this paper, who is an assistant professor in UCLA, by the way, Ken Thompson, also published an ethics paper about the limitations and prospects of such studies. So, for example, just to bring it to the extreme, we really do not want next generation mothers to go to the gynecologist and say, I've always dreamt about my son being a taxi driver, so I need him or her to have hippocampal volume over 440 millimeters squared. Okay? So, we don't want that. So, the ethics issue is important. And the third aspect is not less important. In physics, we see for at least 20 years now global group projects where 70 or 100 researchers from all world countries get together, they get support from their national government, and they run global projects that none of them could do on their own. I don't remember many such projects in biology, definitely not at this level of importance. So that this appears now that the sociology of science in biology is changing. And that's something you need to take good attention to, because this will be the world in which you will do science. The days when someone took 10, 20 patients and published an important article are over. If you want to prove a global concept, you need global cooperation. The main problem we have in this country is that we need to somehow convince our government that this is the case. That's not simple either. So that was a prelude to today's subject, which I'm very excited about. And we are going to talk about Parkinson's disease with the neurogenetics, but not only. Okay. So, again, the connection between body and brain is important in Parkinson's disease, and the picture on the screen is of Molière, who was a very well-known hypochondriac. He kept inventing diseases, and finally, while playing on a show that he wrote, he dropped dead on the stage, which means that even if you are hypochondriac, it doesn't mean that you won't die from it. But we're talking about a disease that affects the brain, but is reflected in changes in body function. And I think we mentioned this concept in connection with Alzheimer's disease, but let me when we talk about neurodegenerative disease, there are two principal theories. One says that the nervous system is a complex system with many different parts. Most of our nerve cells get born once, and that's what we have to do with for the rest of our life. And with aging, different cells die. Starting actually at age 20, we lose about 10 to 20,000 neurons every day. So eventually, when too many parts of the system are gone, the system collapses and we have neurodegenerative disease. So that would be the theory of cumulative damage. But we also can assume a different, more sophisticated theory that says, true, the nervous system is very complex and cells die, but then we activate corrective processes. Another nerve cell takes on it the function of the cell that is lost. And it is only when the correction systems go bad that the system will collapse and will have neurodegenerative disease. So what is important in this concept is not the basic parts, but those that correct damages. And this is particularly important, as you'll see in the next couple of hours, for Parkinson's disease understanding. So what do we know about the history also? The history of Parkinson's disease. This is James Parkinson. And he published a paper in 1817 that was called an essay with an essay on the shaking palsy. The word shaking palsy was used by many before that time, and today we assume that that was used to describe Parkinson's symptoms. Later on, at that century, the leader in neurology was a French neurologist, Charcot, and he added a lot of details and called the disease after Parkinson. So this is when the disease got its name. And a third figure in that, by the way, this is Alzheimer's, and the third figure in the field of Parkinson's disease is Frederick Lowy. And it is amazing that they both were in the same clinic. So this was the clinic in Munich, and many of the names here are associated with specific neurological diseases. This was the time when every 10 years or so someone discovered a new nervous system disease. And Frederick Lowy discovered the pathology behind Parkinson's disease. So what is the neuropathology? What Lowy found are eosinophilic round intracytoplasmic inclusions. Pay attention to the fact that these are intracellular, unlike the amyloid deposits that we covered with Alzheimer's disease, which are primarily extracellular. These are protein inclusions that accumulate within the cell, and they are called Lowy bodies and Lowy neurites, according to Frederick Lowy. So he described them in 1912, and he found that those inclusions were particularly dense in the substantia nigra, the area of the brain which produces a lot of melatonin, and therefore the nerve cells are black. So that's why it's called substantia nigra. And the substantia nigra is the center of the dopamine pathways in the human brain. So we were talking about acetylcholine in Alzheimer's disease. Now we are talking about dopamine. And just like acetylcholine, dopamine sends messages throughout the brain. And you see here the regions. I'm not going to repeat the domains. It will all, of course, be on the website. How common is it? This is the second most common neurodegenerative disease and the most common movement disorder. And it affects 1 to 2% of the population above 65 years, which means that the incidence would be far lower in countries with short life expectancy. And I even brought you a quotation by Shakespeare. So Shakespeare knew about what he called the shaking palsy, and in Richard II he described the frustration where the Duke of York says, why is this arm of mine now a prisoner of the palsy, which is a beautiful someone, they want to take his head off and then see if that will stop the head shaking. And when I was a student, we had a professor of chemistry, and we used to use this cruel joke saying that Professor Curzon comes to class with two containers of liquid, and he says, I'm shaking this one, and you never know which one because he was shaking himself at that level. Anyway. So, how does it look like? This is how the substantia nigra looks, and it's this section of the brain and this region of the brain. And you see that a lot of the black nerve cells are gone in the brain of the Parkinson's disease patient. And it's very sad because today the diagnosis is done after 70% of the nerve cells in that region are dead. And that's why there is no way today to cure Parkinson's disease, because we don't have early diagnosis. All you can do is try to limit the symptoms because the nerve cells are already gone. What about the Lewy bodies? Lewy bodies are not found only in the substantia nigra. Actually, not even only in the brain, but they were found initially in the brain. We find them in different regions of the brain, as you can see here, including the olfactory bulb, which is important because that's one of the early symptoms. Like 20 years before a person becomes a Parkinson's patient, they lose their capacity to smell. And this is because of early damage to the olfactory bulb. But it's mainly in neurons, not in glia, or often not in glia. And this is the major symptoms. So you'll see a trembling head, you'll see a forward tilt of the trunk, reduced arm swinging, rigidity and trembling, and shuffling gait. People walk in small steps. And the reason is loss of dopamine. Because in a normal individual, you need dopamine to enable movement. And when the dopamine is lost, then acetylcholine takes over. These two systems keep talking to each other, and it blocks movement. We know about very famous people who develop Parkinson's disease for two major reasons. One is head injury, so this is Muhammad Ali, who developed very severe Parkinson's disease, and of course that's because of his profession. And this is Michael J. Fox, and the story about him, which I heard in conferences but I never saw it in writing, is that he was involved in a movie setup somewhere in the Bahamas. They were partying, someone gave them a mal-purified recreational drug, and four players of that set developed very early Parkinsonism. I'm not sure that this is the case for him, but I am sure that this is the leading cause for early onset Parkinsonism after the mutations, which are very rare. So bad purification of heroin, for example, results in the production of MPTP, which is a neurotoxin that limits the structure of dopamine, and therefore it gets into the cholinergic neurons and kills them. And this was actually part of the basis for describing Parkinson's disease as a dopaminergic neuroplasticity. Okay. So at some point we try to look for the epidemiology. That is, well, can we see Parkinson's disease with higher or lower incidence? And we found much lower prevalence in China and other Asian countries. It was said on those websites that the data was corrected for life expectancy. But I'm not sure to what same diagnosis is accurate. So maybe it is underestimated. Men tend to get this disease more than women.
לא אכפת לי, אבל את יודעת, הרגשתי שאת יודעת בפיקסון. הולכים חוזרים.
People started to look at dietary effects, but nothing insisted that I can remember why.
They said that all her back, it's a matter of histamine.
These are the countries that we could find. Not all the countries publicized the data.
Have a large non-life expectancy, but they have very low incidence.
That's right. So it's probably a combination of ethnic origin and lifestyle and exposure. You could say that these are areas with intensive agriculture. Exposure to insecticides is known to increase the risk of Parkinsonism. That has been documented.
Right, that's true.
And it could be that the correction for life expectancy is not very accurate in that it's difficult to correct for life expectancy when everyone or almost no one reaches the age when Parkinson's disease starts. So we'll have to wait for incidents coming up in the next decade or so. This is the most recent data we could find, and that's for England. The report was from England, and this is the prediction, what happens now, and this is the prediction for 2030. And as you see, it's an aging disease. The longer life expectancy, the higher is the incidence of this disease. And 5 million to 9 million is already a significant number. It's an important disease. So age is the most important risk factor. Positive family history. Someone asked me once, how do I avoid Parkinson's disease? And the answer was, you've got to pick your parents very carefully, which is difficult to fulfill, but that's where we are. Male gender, higher risk, environmental exposure, herbicides and pesticides, and metals, which are neurotoxic to any nerve cell, but apparently dopaminergic neurons are a little more sensitive. Well water is probably the same. It's high metal content. Farming activities could be related to insecticides, just like rural residents. Wood pulp mills use a lot of liquids that include contaminants, and steel industry is not highly recommended for anyone. Race, we just talked about that, and life experiences, and that includes cognitive features like trauma, emotional stress, but also some people talk about early infections, intense inflammation, and what is shied about is that cigarette smoking and caffeine intake are negative. So and exercise. Right. Exercise is easy, but to talk about cigarette smoking as a positive anything is very difficult. And researchers who tried to publish such studies had tremendous difficulties. It's unbelievable. No one would accept their paper.
Is it nicotine or something else?
It's a nicotine.
So can't you
definitely
bubble gum, nicotine patch or something like
People
that?
don't like that. Apparently it's much better to smoke. I don't know because I never tried.
For long enough to get Parkinson's disease.
That's another issue. No, but those who survived showed really reduced risk, yes.
You said race, but the previous slide was only showing country, that's not race. So was there any particular race that has a higher factor? We're
I mean, ethnic origin immediately implies genetics.
No, I understand, but say which ethnic origin, because by showing a country doesn't necessarily show, like, Canada, United States not really showing enough, or Australia even.
But
It's not really an ethnic origin.
yeah,
It's a
true.
country.
However, this is where the most intensive studies were done, so we have more evidence.
Is it just cigarette smoking or any kind of, I mean, the road system is also dopamine based. So maybe it has something to do with the addictive factor or the feel-good factor of smoking.
People are starting to talk about that. I don't know of any evidence. You're right. The early symptoms of Parkinson apparently include risk-seeking behavior. But no one tried to link that, or actually the efforts to link that with specific genes are continuously contested. Dick Epstein published a variant in the dopamine receptor number 3, and others said, no, you're totally wrong, it's the other variant. So we don't know. The clinics. Of course, the symptom is resting tremor, and which is usually the first, and usually start with the arm. Bradykinesia, so difficulties to perform daily activities, which is a more advanced stage of the disease. Rigidity, which we discussed, so muscle tone is increased because of the imbalance between dopamine and acetylcholine. And this is the difficulty to write, which I brought to you because it is not in English or Hebrew. But you can see that a person is trying to write from top to bottom, remember? And by the end, he is already too fatigued to write properly. And again, this is a picture from Japan, and it shows the stooped posture and the rigid flexors. What else? Instability, people fall. Dysfunction of the autonomic system, so constipation is again a very early symptom. Bladder dysfunction, sweating and hypotension, and depression, which is very difficult to discriminate between aging-related depression. But apparently it's more severe. Now, cognitive impairment is a real problem because we're talking about nerve cells that function on motor functions, not on cognitive functions. Apparently 1/3 of Parkinsonians would display symptoms that are similar to Alzheimer's. And it's not clear yet that it's possible that both diseases are actually each a bunch of diseases, and some of them overlap. And different distinguished neurologists were working very hard on finding the markers, the pathology for diagnosis, which is a real problem still. Those include the same BRAC that determined the BRAC stages in Alzheimer's. So it's the same person, and that's what is done for a lifetime, to determine the pathology in Alzheimer's and in Parkinson. Sleep disorder, I forgot to mention. And the different regions in the brain that are involved. And the most important message of this slide is that sometimes the symptoms start 20 years before the disease commences, which implies that perhaps one day we will be able to cure it when we will know to distinguish those people who just don't feel like sleeping and those who don't sleep because they're about to develop Parkinson's. What about the molecular basis? So there's a whole lot of genes, all of which are termed PARC for Parkinson's disease. And you'll find a déjà vu feeling when you compare those to the set of genes that cause Alzheimer's disease. Because the first issue is the formation of protein precipitates. In Alzheimer's, it's the amyloid gene. In Parkinson, it's the alpha-synuclein. Nobody knows exactly what is the function of alpha-synuclein, and nobody knows exactly what is the function of the amyloid gene. But both of them create precipitates that are insoluble, one in Alzheimer's, one in Parkinson. In both cases, we are actually not sure whether this is the original cause of the disease, or is this a feedback response of the nervous system to the initiation of disease in an effort to remove these proteins away from the system. Okay? So the Lewy bodies will actually be filled with precipitates of the alpha-synuclein. Okay. Now the other one, and you'll see autosomal dominant and autosomal recessive genes, and you'll see that the age of onset is very different. With one gene, the latest to be discovered, PARC9, associated with Parkinsonism, which is familiar and starts before the age of 20. This is very rare, and I think it was found in Japan, and it affects an iron pump, or an presumed iron pump. And the other ones could be protein kinases, so cellular signaling is impaired, mitochondrial genes involved in oxidative stress regulation, again with so parallel issues in Parkinson, E3 ligase, just if you doubted the importance of ubiquitin, this is damaging the ubiquitin system and the alpha-synuclein. So we already know many genes, just like Alzheimer's. All of them together is about 5% of the patients. The others are defined non-familiar. We are not sure whether it is the same disease, but the assumption is that some impairment, which we don't understand yet, in any of several of these genes is involved. And nature, as usual, tries to publish everything together in a very well organized drawing. And you see here that the idea is that alpha-synuclein may be perhaps involved with the sequestration of neurotoxins affecting dopaminergic neurons. Again, the thought is that it would form protofibrils, and that those should go through the proteasome system to get rid of, but if that doesn't happen, then we have a precipitate, and if we have a mutation in the proteasome pathway, we'll have the same type of deficiency. And again, processing of the ubiquitin system, ADP and metabolic activities controlling oxidative stress, mitochondrial processes controlling the energy metabolism in the brain, and again, dysfunction of the proteasome, and even tangles of tau, just like those that we mentioned in Alzheimer's. All of that causes Lewy bodies, and in essence, you should say that anything that goes wrong in the basic function of a nerve cell can bring about neurodegenerative disease. Okay, so let's remember mitochondria and ubiquitin. Which are the main regions? Okay.
Are there any cases of Parkinson and Alzheimer's?
Definitely. 1/3 of Parkinsonian patients display the cognitive symptoms characteristic of Alzheimer's. But you could say that you might expect this, because if at the age of 85, 50% of individuals will have Alzheimer's, and 5% will have Parkinson, there's a very big chance that people will have both diseases.
When you say 5% of the Parkinsonians.
No, 5% of the population at the age of 85 will have Parkinson.
I have a different question regarding the inheritance.
Yeah.
You said, maybe I misunderstood. You said 5% of the people who have Parkinson carry those genes you talked about. So does it mean that
carry mutations in those genes?
Oh.
We all carry these genes.
Okay.
Okay? They have a version of the gene which is not functioning well.
Okay, so does it mean that 95%, the other 95%, just, woke up one day sick without having any family history of Parkinson's disease?
Right, exactly.
Okay.
They might have been exposed to insecticides or pesticides or to work-related toxic materials, or they might have eaten a bad diet, that was asked, and that makes sense, or they might have not practiced sports activities enough, or they might have gotten sick for another reason that we don't understand yet. But most of them did not get sick because of a specific mutation in one of these genes. Okay? So, yeah.
When you do autopsies on these brains, do you see both types of plaques, the Lewy bodies and
in some cases, if they have both symptoms, yeah. Again, most individuals at the age of 85 will have amyloid plaques already.
Yeah, but for example, in autoimmune disease, we know that if one person has one autoimmune disease, the chances of having another greatly increases. This disease often come together. So
I can't say that about Alzheimer's and Parkinson. I'm saying that just by statistics enough alone is to be expected. Okay, so substantia nigra is the main region in the brain which is affected, and that's the origin, the major origin of the cholinergic innervation to this striatum. And it is part of the extrapyramidal system which processes information coming from the cortex to the striatum, and they going back into the cortex through the thalamus. And that's important because we'll get to that with regards to surgery. And one major function of the striatum is regulation of muscle tone and posture. So if the information getting to it is not functioning well, no wonder that this would be a brain-affected region. And again, the ubiquitin pathway, you probably heard about it in different courses, and for those who didn't hear about it, here it is. Any defect in the ubiquitin pathway may increase the risk of any neurodegenerative disease. So it's not surprising that one of the five genes is the ubiquitin ligase over here. So all in all, let's compare what happens in the brain in the healthy state on the left-hand side to the Parkinson state on the right-hand side. We have the motor cortex that communicates with the basal ganglia, and dopamine is an important stimulator of the basal ganglia. And acetylcholine is a balancer of that stimulation. So you would say, for example, that a lot of Parkinson's patients start the disease with a state of risk-seeking behavior. They suddenly gamble. They overdrive. I have a cousin who started taking her husband's car and disappearing for long drives and getting driving tickets, which she never did before. And finally they diagnosed her. And she went to the neurologist, and then I learned that in this country, if a neurologist identifies Parkinson's disease, the first thing they have to do is take the driver's license and announce it to the Ministry of Interior. And this was a horrible crisis for her. She didn't even know she was sick. And she got out of that office with a last sentence and the forbidden drive, which is awful. Anyway, so we would say all of those messages go through the spinal cord to control muscle activities, and if we do not have dopamine, then acetylcholine will take over and we will have arrested muscle movement as Shakespeare. And consistent with this theory, the very first treatment approaches involved controlling the cholinergic system. So this is an old paper from 67. Imagine, at 67, people still did not use anything to control the dopaminergic system to treat Parkinson patients. They treated the cholinergic block. And what you see here is the effort of a patient to draw a spiral. And that patient was treated, and he also tried to write. He was treated with an extract of belladonna. Belladonna, you know what it includes?
Women use it as makeup.
And you use it against diarrhea to block cholinergic hyperexcitation. This is the source of atrophy. Belladonna atropa, this is where the name atropine comes from. And when this guy is treated with belladonna drops, his capacity to draw and to write is improved. Then he is treated with the extract of physostigma. This is the source of physostigmine, the original blocker of cholinesterase. And what happens then is he loses the capacity to draw. And both are reversible. So this is evidently the result of the drug. And the initial effort to treat Parkinson's disease patients were to try to balance between blockade and activation of the cholinergic system, with the understanding that this blockade is the problem that causes tremor and fever. So the problem is acetylcholine and dopamine. Today, most patients are treated with a dopamine replacement therapy, L-DOPA, which we'll talk about it a little bit. But then I wanted to mention a student in the lab found this paper, which I love. Apparently, in India, 2500 BC, there was already a plant that was used to treat Parkinson's patients. And that plant is the origin of L-DOPA. It's quite similar to the Chinese plant, Rupelzin, which is the ancient origin of cholinesterase blocker and the treatment of Alzheimer's disease. So, you know, there's a lot to learn from ancient cultures. But today, what is used is dopamine replacement therapy, or neurosurgery, or stem cell therapy, which we will talk a little bit later today. And in development are genetic drugs that are targeted at these familial forms, hoping that those non-familial patients will also benefit from improving the function of the basic cellular activities. Okay, we'll take a break now. ומעולה.
לא כל כך
זה
חפש.
היה עמוס, כאילו לקחו לי לך, לא יודעת כלום. לא, היא ברחה למשמורת לכל החג, וגם כשבאתי לשם, ניסיתי לצמצם, זה לא עבד.
כמה זמן היה לנו לדבר?
לא, היא דיברה בול שעה. אבל אמרו, בסדר, אבל לא.
יש לנו מה ללמוד.
כן, היא תלמידה שלך גם. לא יכולה בה. אני הולכת לטלוויזיה לדבר על המחקרים האלה, זה לא סתם אני קוראת אותם מהבוקר.
איפה?
בערוץ הראשון, יהיו להם. לפחות הם אמרו לי להיות שם. אבל זה באמת סדרה מדהימה של מאמרים. כן,
כמו גם שנייה, כל מיני דברים, כל מיני דברים.
הם מאוד חבים זהו.
כן, הם בטח תמיד קוראים לו. זה היה בכלל דיכאון, זה לא קשור
איך החבר שלי אומר, מי גאדנס, אשתו של דן רגל, הוא חוקר מוח. אני מיד אתך, אני יודעת. תחפשי לי גם משהו כללי על פרויקט אניגמה. נכון, הצלחת להשיג את אורי? אוקיי, יופי. לא, חשבתי שפשוט רוצה להיות שם. נכון, אוקיי, טוב, תודה, ביי. Okay. So as usual, in parallel to the development of small molecule therapeutics, there were neurosurgeons, and they wanted to develop their approaches. And initially, they tried to disconnect the regions of the brain that are affected, or just disconnect the thalamus altogether with this problem. In 1950, they started trying to stimulate the thalamus, and in the 60s, they started really to introduce electrodes to induce stimulation, if you wish, as a replacement of the nerve cells that are not there. So this is taken from the website of Metabolism, which is the leading company producing these electrodes. The technology is based on an original study by Bergman, who was then a postdoc in the States, in science, and which was done in monkeys. And what is done is to introduce an electrode with a stimulator over here, just like a pacemaker for a heart problem. The electrodes are bilateral, and they are introduced mainly in the subthalamic nucleus. Just by trial and error, this was the site that gave the best result. And this stimulates the thalamus so that it compensates for a large part of the tremor symptoms. So this is the region that we are talking about. Here is the substantia nigra, and the subthalamic nucleus is just a little above it, which means that it's not simple at all to introduce such a surgical operation. About 400 such treatments were done in Adasa so far, and of course many more in the world. I think we counted 30,000 or so. But it's not a routine procedure, simply because nobody would like to go through neurosurgery if there is no other option.
What is the success rate of this surgery? How many patients actually?
The question is, what does one call a success rate? And it's so individual, people do not know yet how to select those patients who will benefit the most. And that's part of the PhD study that Chagai and I directed. But let's compare this to what happens in neurochemical approaches. So dopamine is produced from the amino acid tyrosine, and it's packed in vesicles, and it goes into the synaptic clefts and interacts with dopamine receptors, which are originally numbered 1 to 5, and this modulates the ion penetrance through different channels and changes metabolism and gene expression, not only in the brain, but also in the periphery, which is an important aspect also for Alzheimer's disease. So there are a lot of papers saying that white blood cells, the nucleated blood cells, operate as a mirror image to what happens in the brain. And people try to diagnose schizophrenia and other neurological syndromes by looking at blood cell gene expression. So who knows who that is? This is Oliver Sacks. Did anyone here see Awakening? Okay. So there was a wonderful movie, highly recommended, which talked about an epidemic that was in the States in the both diagnosis was far, far behind compared to what it is today. And the major symptoms were total rigidity. People were actually confined to bed. They couldn't speak, they couldn't move, they couldn't do anything. And Oliver Sacks, who is an author and a neurology expert, decided to try on them L-DOPA. And the movie is all about how those patients, some of whom didn't move for 15 years, start to get up and walk and move and talk, which was very erratic initially because no one knew the dose. But that was one of the first experiences where L-DOPA has been used. His books are highly recommended. Anyone who's interested, I think the first is called The Man Who Thought His Wife Was a Hat. And then he has a book about music. This is from the back of that book. And another one about vision. He's really a wonderful writer. And the latest one is about how he grew up in England and wanted to become a chemist. And somehow, from disappointed with chemistry, he came to be what he is today. So, dopamine was discovered in the late 50s. And it was then found that the highest levels exist in the striatum. In 1960, these two researchers showed that dopamine levels go down in the striatum of Parkinson's patients. So, about 50 years ago. And then it was gradually found that the symptoms of the disease start only when 50 to 60% of these neurons are lost. And that opened the quest for development of replacement therapy. So the L-dehydrophenylalanine, or L-DOPA, is a precursor of dopamine that is capable of crossing the blood-brain barrier. And this precursor gets hydrolyzed to produce dopamine. It can restore the brain dopamine levels. It improves motor functions in animals treated with catecholamine depleting drugs, such as Therapeutic. So that again is the late 50s. It took a long time until L-DOPA became an established treatment. The first attempts were, people were improved for 10 minutes and then they declined again. And it took years before the researchers found, really by trial and error, what is the dose and how frequently should one take the drug and so on to benefit from that. And this is the cornerstone of Parkinsonian treatment today. You find different other drugs, but those are basically L-DOPA variants that can operate on one or two more enzymes, and we will look at that in a minute. So, what happens with L-DOPA? L-DOPA can cross the blood-brain barrier, and then there is the dopamine decarboxylase, which produces dopamine from it, and the dopamine is hydrolyzed by dopamine beta hydroxylase and norepinephrine. So that's what happens in the brain. But L-DOPA can also function in the periphery. And again, you have a peripheral DOPA decarboxylase, and you'll create norepinephrine also in the periphery. And understanding that brought about an improvement in the construction of these drugs, because people understood that there are limitations too. First, there is a period when the patients get stabilized on L-DOPA that is called the L-DOPA honeymoon, which can last like 5 years. And during that period, the patients function almost normally. But eventually, nerve cells go on dying. So the drug becomes less and less efficient as the disease progresses. Also, the chronic treatment is associated with side effects like motor fluctuations fluctuation or dyskinesia and neuropsychiatric problems. And the main problem is that this is not a cure, this is symptomatic relief. And while the patient is treated, the nerve cells go on dying and the situation worsens. So there were pharmacological attempts to get over at least part of the problem. And the idea was, here is levodopa, we give L-dopa in the periphery, and it is processed into dopamine, but we're not interested in that. So let's block dopamine decarboxylase in the periphery. We want it to go into the brain, and when in the brain, we want it to go that direction and not this direction. So let's try to combine the features. And different inhibitors of COMT, the catechol O-methyl transferase, were developed to try to improve the length, the duration of treatment and so on. By the way, COMT is one of the genes that were associated in genetic studies with schizophrenia, for example, and now the new genetic, Nature Genetics series of papers that I talked about says this is not global. It could be ethnic, but not a global effect. And this is developed in the Technion by Husayuddin. Selegiline is a multi-drug because it can also block monoamine oxidase, which is another trial or attempt to take care of a disease by having multifunctional blockers that will hopefully balance the entire system at one step, which is very difficult to do because the biological system is stronger than any of these efforts. And if the system is imbalanced to begin with, it is almost impossible to rebalance it with drugs. But in any case, what people do is to treat with levodopa while blocking the change through COMT and blocking the change through dopa decarboxylase and allowing penetration into the brain, but blocking the monoamine oxidase so that it won't be degraded and potentiating dopaminergic neurons. So at the same time, with a multi-drug package, the effort is to help the remaining nerve cells to function as best as possible. Which brings us to the question of diagnosis. Anamnesis, of course, not anamnesis. Okay? Anamnesis and clinical examination is but there is no disease-specific physiological marker. So it's not like there's any enzyme that would be so low in activity that you would say, aha, you have Parkinson's disease. This doesn't exist. So the other approach is indeed brain mapping. So positron emission tomography or SPECT with dopaminergic radioligand. So you inject a radioligand that detects the dopaminergic neurons, and you run brain mapping, and you look for the radioactive images and find out to what extent the substantia nigra is damaged. And finally, as you need in any case of complicated diagnosis, is to exclude other causes, like he didn't take any dirty drug. It's not because of exposure to pesticides and so on. And this is how it looks. So if you look at the normal brain or Parkinsonian brain, this is the substantia nigra, and it's enriched with dopaminergic neurons. In different Parkinson patients, you see depletion to different extents. When you treat them with L-dopa, you see improvement to different extents. But this is clearly a diagnostic tool that can work. And that brings us to the issue of stem cells, which is probably one of the main promises to really cure letting neurons reappear in any other way. Let's inject them into the brain and let them develop and reconnect and thus take care of the disease. So again, this is Muhammad Ali, and the idea is to inject into the substantia nigra stem cells that will be capable of differentiating into dopaminergic neurons, connect with the total network, and improve the symptoms. And of course, you need injection that would be bilateral. The effort was initially a very problematic one because stem cell biology didn't exist. When the idea came about, all that researchers knew is that the embryonic brain contains stem cells or neuronal progenitor cells that can potentially develop into dopaminergic neurons. And somehow a pyradic therapeutic approach developed, mainly in South America, in pyradic clinics, where people were sacrificing embryos to treat Parkinson's patients. In most cases, these were very rich people coming from other countries and very poor girls who got pregnant in order to make money, which was stopped eventually, but it was a real, how do I say, a real medical development in those countries. And the idea today, of course, is to use stem cell lines, find out the conditions by which one can induce them to differentiate into dopaminergic neurons, or take cells from the patients themselves and reverse them into the stem cell or the progenitor stem cell stage, in which case you don't have the need to suppress rejection, which is the case if you inject neurons just from an embryo. You also need to treat those patients as you would treat someone with cardiac transplant. You need to repress any immune rejection.
But the brain is immunoprivileged, so it's not as
So
bad.
it is thought, but still it is used.
Yeah.
I agree. I agree, but they still use them. And I found one study that I'd like to go through with you because it is interesting. What I found interesting first is the coverage of those patients. It's a study from 2008, so not too recent, but this is a post-mortem study of people who were transplanted up to 16 years before. So the people were operated on in the 90s, before stem cells were available, injected with pieces of embryonic brain or cells taken off embryonic brain. And then many years later, their dopaminergic neurons started to develop synuclein plaques. So something happened which caused those transplanted stem cells to get Parkinsonian even in the host. So let's try to find out. Okay, I brought the reasons for formation of Lewy bodies again. So the initial idea was, could it be a lack of growth factor? Just like in Alzheimer's disease, there were attempts to inject recombinant nerve growth factor, and they were not very successful. It is still thought that inflammation is a contributing factor. We talked about oxidative stress and hyperexcitability of the nerve cells. And of course, the alpha-synuclein is a genetic cause if it is mutated. And these would be the Lewy bodies, but here you see them in the grafted neurons. So it's not the original dopaminergic nerve cells from the patient's brain, but the grafted one. And look at this. This review covered 8 grafted Parkinson Britain or the United States or Canada, not from South America where most of the operations were done. They all got sick very early. So the age at surgery was like 50 or 40. The latest was 70. The age at disease onset is quite young. So nobody dared to operate on people who got sick very late. But still, these poor people lived, in some cases, 16 years after the operation. And they found Lewy bodies in the graft in 3 out of the 8 cases. The dopaminergic neurons in the graft were very variable, so the success of the operation was between 100,000 and 10,000. That's very inaccurate. And look, these are the injection tracts per stratum, so they injected in multi-points. And this is the number of donor embryos. It's scary to see that 9 live embryos had to be sacrificed to treat one person. So this, thank God this was stopped. But just to see this in writing gave me the shivers. Now, here are the preparations. They used fresh tissue, they prepared cell suspension, or they even took small tissue pieces of cell suspension again, and people were treated with immunosuppressors, so they got cyclosporin, all of them. They got prednisolone, so they got steroids also. I mean, they were very sick people altogether. And they tried to count the number of microglia, and they see, when they say increase, that means compared to a normal control brain. So there is an inflammatory reaction to the operation. And note the cause of death. They all died from pneumonia or cardiac arrest. One had renal failure, who at the age of 60, that's very young. Yeah.
Did they talk about, did they report if this surgery, I mean, if the patient showed a better state after the operation, or?
Oh yeah, they did.
They all did.
That's why they were interesting to follow. These are the successful cases. There were many cases that were not successful, and they are not recorded.
Did they talk about what day the embryo was, or how exactly they did the surgery?
I think it was 5 weeks embryo, really very, very young. The first time that you can isolate the brain. But it created a whole lot of ethical discussion, and that's why it was eventually stopped. Or maybe it was not anymore. I wouldn't even be able to say which is correct. That was the beginning. Maybe it was stopped because now there is a better approach. We don't know if there is a private clinic somewhere that injects stem cells from culture. Could very well be. But that technology is not ripe yet either. So, anyway, some of these people gained another 10 years. The ethical issue is whether this is worth the price. And of course, there were a lot of animal models. And just like the case of Alzheimer's disease, none of the animal models available is satisfactory. I brought you one figure from a review on the use of the where other side. Same gene is affected in human patients. And one gene that I liked a lot is ACE, which is intratropical, the acetylcholinesterase gene. So again, if this is the enzyme hydrolyzing acetylcholine, then imbalance with dopamine would be relevant here as well. Yeah, yes.
Earlier you said that L-DOPA can also cause the
Not that I know. The dopamine induces signaling, but not, as far as I know, not cell proliferation. Not that I know. Thanks for asking. It's an important point. Okay. So some of the genes here are the same genes that were found in humans. Like the LARC2 is one of the well-identified Parkinsonian risk genes in humans, and PARC, of course, is the same. And catecholamine regulators, again, so it's really, it's amazing to what extent a fly mimics the same pathway in terms of neurodegeneration. Now, why was I excited about acetylcholinesterase? First, because I like this gene a lot, but second, because it controls inflammation. So what acetylcholine does in the periphery is to interact with the receptor for acetylcholine on the surface of macrophages and block the production of proliferative cytokines. And those can get back into the brain and affect brain function. So hyperactivity of acetylcholinesterase would be bad news and a risk factor for Parkinson's disease. Now I want to, in terms of information, I want to draw your attention to another paper which appeared in Science in 2004, but refers to death data, death records in Sweden in the last century, or the one before. What the researchers did is they sat in Berkeley and they said, we would like to find out to what extent inflammation affects life expectancy at large. And we want to find that without the antibiotic treatment which blocks inflammation. So they looked into the Swedish records, which are very well organized, and were so from 1751. They could find the family records and death records, and what they do here is to analyze the cohort mortality and the period mortality. That is, how many people die per year who are just born. This was a very high mortality rate. Remember, in the 18th century, a lot of newborn babies didn't survive. They did not make it. And it went down and down, but it only stabilized at the age of 10 or 12. And you can see here in the drawings that there was not that much of a change. The decline was with the progression of advanced medicine. And I think we mentioned that in our first lesson, and if we didn't, then who knows what was the life expectancy in the United States in 1900? 49. So that there were people who reached the age of 85 tells you that the average life expectancy did not mean that nobody survived. What it meant was that a lot of babies didn't make it to their 5th year. And this went down do not die that frequently anymore. When we talk today about prolonged life expectancy, it does mean that people will reach an older age. And what they found was that there was an association between mortality in the first 5 years and the average life expectancy. That is, their conclusion, and I highly recommend this paper, is that acute inflammation shortens one's life. So in that aspect, those parents who say, you know, we don't need antibiotics, it's only damaging, it's not only damaging because being sick is a damage by itself. Or in other words, inflammation is bad news for many diseases, including neurodegenerative disease. And in that aspect, of course, we want to talk about metabolism of gene expression as another cause. So DNA makes RNA, makes protein. And mutations of single nucleotide polymorphisms may affect the functioning of genes. So if we will know which single nucleotide polymorphisms affect the occurrence of disease or life expectancy, we are going one step ahead in finding what are the pathways that we need to function better in order to avoid such a disease and reach longer life expectancy. So what I want to tell you is that a lot of the mutations, the single point mutations that we know about, cause disease because they affect RNA metabolism steps. So it's the very basic before we get into inflammation, before we get into mitochondrial function. The capacity of genes to be expressed to begin with is a pivotal element in making life longer. And 50% of these mutations are neuronal related. So not only do we need RNA metabolism to be there, but we need it especially in nerve cells because there is no replacement. If a nerve cell is gone, it's gone. That's why these mutations are so important for neurodegenerative disease. So these are mutations, fine. But is this a rule that holds true also for acquired changes in RNA metabolism? Would exposure to pesticides damage RNA metabolism? And would it cause inflammation? So this is one study, Lilach Sorek, who happens to be my daughter-in-law, did her PhD with Chagai Bergman, and yesterday she gave a PhD talk at Enigma, and this is a slide she organized to show how she analyzed a data set published by Harvard scientists on 100 Parkinsonian patients at their first diagnosis. So this is as early as you can get in Parkinson's disease. And she took the data set off the website, and she's a computer scientist, probably unlike the people who did that study, and she came to me and she said the most important parameter in that set is the day that the chips were scanned. So she had to correct for that, and she even wrote that in the paper, which is probably the reason for very tough criticism on her subsequent papers. But what she could find when she drew a neuronal network is that the most heavily affected genes were inflammatory ones. So neuroinflammation appears to be an apparent affected pathway which can be detected in blood leukocytes from early Parkinsonian patients. These were data sets of chips that had only probes at the 3' end of the transcript, so the earlier generation chips. And then we thought that perhaps we can solve the problem of the very little money that is allocated for research in Israel by being smarter. So why is it so difficult to analyze neurogenetic related changes in people? Because unlike the mice or the flies, people do not inbreed, or at least they do not inbreed tightly enough to overcome the effect of genetic heterogeneity. But people who go through deep brain stimulation would be there before and after surgery. And their symptoms would go down drastically after the surgery. So if we take, we thought, a group of patients before and after, we don't need 15,000. We may be able to see the effect in a smaller group of patients. So these are Chagai Bergman here, who actually wrote the very first science paper on deep brain stimulation, and Zvi Israel with a neurosurgeon at Hadassah. And they did together about 400 operations like that in Jerusalem. And what Lilach did was to recruit a set of volunteers from those who went through the operation, prepare blood leukocytes, and analyze gene expression. So here is a movie about the operation. This is a guy who is an engineer working at Hadassah. He developed very early Parkinsonism. By the way, it's the same person in both parts of the movie. This is before on the left and after the surgery on the right. So you see to what extent deep brain stimulation changes all of those symptoms that we talked about, including fine control of movement. I mean, the guy came back to work after the operation. And he functions dramatically better and gets like 10-fold lower dosage of L-DOP. So when we came to analyze the data from these patients, we already had a better technology, which are exon microarrays. Exon microarrays do not look at a gene, not only at the end, but they look at each exon. And we did discuss that a little bit with regards to Alzheimer's. So we had so many probes that the analysis would be much more precise. And the analysis included 4 different groups. First were healthy controls, and I need to tell you a secret. In most academic studies, healthy controls are professors, because they are around and they can be easily convinced to volunteer blood samples, which means that it's not fully representative. It's certainly an overused group of volunteers, but that's where we are. So healthy controls, Parkinson patients, who are all advanced at this level because they came to surgery. The deep brain stimulation is only used in advanced patients who do not react well anymore to L-DOPA, because otherwise there is no justification to get into this dangerous procedure and costly one. And then, when they were after the surgery and stabilized on a lower dose amount 3 months later, and finally they were convinced to accept discontinuation of the electrode for 1 month. For 1 hour. Within 15 minutes they get tremoring again. It's a very tough procedure for them. It is done anyway when they need to replace the battery. But the idea there was to view the effects of the stimulus, not the operation. Because if you compare these patients before and after surgery, the effects could be the surgery and the stimulation, but you can't really distinguish between them. However, if you disconnect the stimulus, the difference between on and off is only the stimulus, because the operation is months before. So these are the four conditions. RNA, cDNA preparation, and exon arrays were done as recommended. And we only used males because they're easier to control. And because there is more of them in Parkinson. And there were two types of microarrays, which were both experimental at the time. One was the exon microarray, which looks at each exon, and the other one was a junction microarray, which looks at the junction sites between exons, and 5 probes at each junction. So it's very in-depth approach, and all that was subjected to analysis. So here are the patients, or the groups. These would be about 56 of age, the same for healthy controls and Parkinson patients, the same white blood cell count, the same red blood cell count, same weight. All the characteristics were matched as best as possible. And this is how the computer organized them. So what you see here are genes that were over or underexpressed in healthy controls compared to Parkinson patients. And at first, we rechecked and rechecked, but the computer knew automatically, independently, who belonged to which group. So the difference between the groups was tremendous, between sick and healthy controls. And again, these are different genes that involved all of those functions that we discussed. And then we looked at junction microarrays. We had more signals, again, the same distribution. And what you see here in this scale is the severity of motor symptoms, the neurology determination. So exon arrays and junction arrays, pre and post surgery, and on and off. So 1 hour we saw a difference, which was mind-boggling. How can you see a change in gene expression in 1 hour? So one way to explain it is that a stressful experience, and it's definitely a very stressful experience for the patients who start trembling again, involves release of nucleated blood cells from lacunas in the bone marrow into the circulation. So these could be different type of cells, but still the difference was amazing. And the next question was, what kind of changes do we see? What are the groups of genes that show modified function? And the groups of genes were Parkinson-related, signaling-related, splicing and transcription came next, which again talks about RNA metabolism. And then inflammation, and finally, dopamine and acetylcholine balance. And if we compare pre to post operation, you see a mirror image of those changes. So the main changes were inverse in disease patients from healthy controls, and after surgery, they became closer to the healthy controls. And if we did the off stimulus, then again you get the same pattern as under disease. Finally, the extent of change reflected the change in the motor symptoms as determined independently by a neurologist. So this is really a mirror image of the signal. And we could find 29 genes which changed in all comparison between healthy to patient, between pre to post surgery, between on and off stimulus. And when we looked at these 29 genes and asked the computer to subclassify the samples, we we got the healthy controls classified together with post-operation patients. And those that were sick before operation grouped together with those that were off stimulus, which again says that the changes were in the direction so that the stimulus brought the condition closer to a healthy one, and the off stimulus reversed it. And this is the association with the neurological score. So, these are the genes that we saw, but I think that we will skip that. The last slide that I want to show you is this one. We took that set of genes and we asked, what about those early patients, not advanced, that were identified at Harvard? Would those be classified? We don't see the same clean classification as we did, but the computer knew to separate most of the Parkinson from most of the controls. You see, the dark gray is the Parkinson, only 2 of the healthy controls classified with them, and as we wrote in the paper, these are apparently healthy, because you never know who will get sick in 5 years' time.
But this is also localized, right?
Yeah, it's also localized, but it's a different technology. These are 3' chips, okay? And again, we could analyze healthy controls from neurological controls who apparently have another disease. We wrote them. Which disease it is, they refused to answer. But both the healthy controls and the neurological controls largely were classified by these 6 genes that were shared between advanced and early patients. I think that is what I came to tell you about today. Next week we have Adrian Kreiner, who is a very famous developer of therapeutics for SMA, for spinal muscular atrophy. Anyone who wants to talk to him personally gets in touch with more through email, because he's willing to talk to students. He's always looking for good postdocs. Yes?
You consider trying using this approach to predict disease in patients, to get all blood samples and try to see today who will be Parkinson's patient?
We didn't there yet, but that's the thought. That's what the discussion said. Okay, any other questions? If not, then I thank you very much. הם לא אמרו לנו.
אבל מחלות נוירולוגיות?
כן, רק נורולוגי. למה שהם ייתנו לנו אדוונס? ועכשיו לא קיבלתי עכשיו את המאמר הבא שלהם על בדיוק.
כאילו, הם צריכים לעמוד באותו...
תראי, אנחנו עכשיו בדיוק בהמשך לשאלה. אנחנו בודקים 30 חולים שהמחלה מקבלת בדיוק, 30 חולים שמקבלת לאט, ואנחנו רוצים לראות אם ההבדלים ביניהם מקבילים לאלה שהסטימוליישן עושה.
אוקיי.
זאת אומרת, בתקווה שהסטימוליישן מעיד, אבל אני עוד לא יודעת את התשובה.
כי בינתיים לא יודעים שהוא מעיד, יודעים שהוא רק...
לא יודעים.
way like you get the samples while surgery and somehow
You don't even ask, not in this country. No, there is hardly post-mortem surgery in Israel. The brain samples for the Alzheimer's study we got from Amsterdam. We don't do that.
Why did you choose 1 hour after surgery?
Because that's the longest you could convince them to stay. They feel so bad. It's just inhumane to let them stay longer. Normally there are 15 minutes without the battery for replacement. But this was 1 hour. And
basically you got lucky because if you had to plan this, you wouldn't choose 1 hour. You would choose 5 hours, 6 hours,
yeah.
1 day.
Well, we knew it 15 minutes. And now we are writing a new paper, and what we find is that probably the main reason for the changes we see is nonsense-mediated decay. Because that, you target a transcript that is already done, and off it goes. And that can happen fast. It was quite surprising. Hello? Hello?
שמושפעים מסטימולציה. כי אני יודע שבסטרמינלים של אקסונים זה סתם סטימולציה, היציבות שלהם RNA.
כן. אבל באלוקטיבים זה מושפע. רק ההצרה היא שאתה לא יודע, you can't ever distinguish between the possibility that the transcripts were changed in the same cells you analyzed before, or that the cell composition was changed, therefore you see a change in transcripts. And I would guess that it's a combination of both.
But you contribute this change in the chromosome to the actual brain stimulation?
Oh yeah.
Could be that it's the actual stimulation on the blood cells?
It's the brain stimulus sends messages to the body.
No, I'm saying could be that it's the actual response of the blood cells to the stimulation, to the electricity. Not through the brain that signals to the blood. How do you know?
The electricity is limited to the subthalamic nucleus.
But there is brain.
But they did analyze brain activities. In all other brain regions, the activity remains normal.
What
only that region.
The activity of what?
Electrophysiological. They run electroencephalography studies. You really should read the Guy's paper. It's a selective change in the activated domain, in the ventral subventricular thalamus.
Okay, I want another question.
Okay.
The actual stimulation lasts for how long?
It's ongoing. The stimulus is ongoing.
Okay.
It's consistent.
So at this okay. So all the blood basically can circulate through the same place where you stimulate, right?
Yes.
So in 5 minutes, all blood cells will go through this area. So maybe they're affected from the actual stimulation.
I cannot distinguish between these possibilities.
Did you try to stimulate here and look at the blood cells?
No.
I'm
not sure it would be a good control. Because the brain also adds an effect. The surrounding domain adds an effect. I cannot distinguish between that. But the change is so dramatic.
זה מדהים לראות.
It's amazing.
Yeah. The guy looks like completely recovered. I think it's just amazing, right, to see.
It's amazing.
This is why I'm saying maybe not through the brain, just the electricity.
I actually can't exclude that, and we'll include it in the next discussion. Thank you.
אפשר לעשות את זה כאילו במבחנה, לקחת איזשהו וולטאז' שהוא מתאים למה
את יודעת מדולי שוולטאז' משפיע על ג'ין אקספרשן.
כן, אז לעשות את זה קונטרול, לקחת את הדם הזה ולהעביר בו גם לנסות לעשות את זה דרך השני.